Welcome to the Health and Wealth Podcast.
All right, so today we have, what do health and wealth have to do with each other? Jason, thank you for that awesome question. In essence, the short answer is you can't do one without the other. And Stacy, why don't you start us off with how we could jump into that?
I just wanted you to finish your thought, though. It wasn't just like you can't do one without the other. You discussed you can't do one without the other in a meaningful way. And intentionality is a big part of what helps us to experience a more positive, optimal level of health and wealth. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. And to jump right into some examples, there's one that comes to mind, a study that was done for people that were being following adults for most of their lives. It was like 2,000 adults. And, health in relation to relationships, friendships. Basically, what the study found was that the people that had the most joy throughout their life consistently were the ones that had meaningful relationships, friendships, that they could look back on and say, oh, that was awesome. It wasn't necessarily like, I made $1.75 billion in one night flat. Like, it was, how did those friendships affect them?
Yeah, and so I will tag on to that too. And that's not to say money itself is not important or that we don't need it to function. Because I could speak for like us as Christians. Sometimes that thought process of, because, the rich man can't get to heaven, that means money is not important. And no, that couldn't be furthest from the truth. It's the root of all evil, which could include money, but it's a reflection of who you are on that journey to receiving your wealth and health, especially wealth though in this category, and also who you become at the end of that. And so can you sleep at night basically with how you make your money, and then also how you steward that money is really important as well, because if you make money and you give it all away, don't take care of your household is one thing. If you make money and you hoard it all, that's another thing. Like all of those extremes, just like if you're super, super healthy, that can cause some issues in itself versus like I eat fast food every day, don't move, don't care what I do with my body, that can cause issues. So finding that happy medium in both of those categories, I think, will really help us as us having this human experience be more fruitful.
Yeah, and there's a couple things that came up when you were talking about that. The root of the evil is really the love of money. So if somebody takes it away from you, will you cry like wah 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 wah, like a little baby, and like your life would just go down the drain fast, or would you figure out a way to continue forward? And then the other tie into that is another Bible verse that you alluded to. It's difficult. It's more easy to go through a eye of a needle than to become a rich man that goes to heaven. But it's very interesting that if you think about it from a physical perspective, going through an eye of a needle means you get smaller. And getting smaller makes me think of, I got the pleasure of meeting the investment manager for the Rockefellers a few years ago, and he said what happened with the father that really was the main tycoon that led all this wealth for the family was that he was essentially got all these maladies in his body, all these illnesses, and he decided, I'm just going to give 90% of my money away, and did all these charitable things and all these great things for God, essentially. And surprisingly, perhaps not surprisingly, all of his maladies went away. And so, in a way, he became small for God to do great works out in the world. So if we take that perspective too, when we think about wealth, and not necessarily you just have to run away from it all the time, but use it as a a vessel to do God's business, or if you don't believe in God, to just do well for the world, I think that could also be a huge benefit to you.
And I'll add to that, because that's a good point. I have 3 points I want to add. Oh, were you finished?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
3 points I wanted to add to that. One is pray and be intentional with that decision as well, because there are some things that are global. Okay, yeah, that's great. And there's some things that are more time decisions that are made. So 90% of $1 billion+ and 90% of I got to pay paycheck to paycheck are two different scenarios as well.
Yeah.
So there is a way to still give actual money, still steward in other ways. So I don't want people that feel like I'm paycheck to paycheck is between paying my light bill or giving, to feel like that they have to do that to be a quote unquote good person. Because remember, as Christians, for those who are, our works are not what has God love us, right? It's never going to be our works. It's our heart posture and our identity, where we focus as well. So that should be the foundation, not how fast can I give something away, how good of a person I am, because there are plenty of ways that you could be a good person without digging yourself deeper into the hole. Because first and foremost, your responsibility is to whoever the people are immediately around you. And then, of course, we expand out into, the community, your church community, and the greater world. Yeah, I don't know. Everybody thinks a little differently, but I would never want anybody to compromise their household or compromise the people that they have been entrusted to be responsible for, to be a quote unquote good person. So I would say pray and be intentional about that as well, as to when to make those kind of bigger moves. Like, that's a big move. The bigger moves, and some people may be called to do that, but I would say be mindful and really think about the hearts you've been entrusted with under your actual roof and in your communities as well. And the other thing that I kind of alluded to when I was making that statement is the heart posture. Is the more we focus on our heart posture, where we are focused, why are we doing certain things? What are the intentions truly behind it? Like, is it really because I want to be a good person for the Lord, or because I want to be a good person because I might not like some of the things I'm doing behind closed doors and I feel like this is going to balance it out? Those are two different heart postures. So we need to be honest with ourselves as well. And I think in our world today, there's so many things that can pull us away, whether you believe in God or not believe in God, pull us away from whatever our aligned will is or aligned purpose is in life. And so we need to be mindful of why we're making certain decisions, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of truly being able to heal and build something that can stand, which I think brings us right back into the wealth piece, because the wealth is something that can stand the test of time. There's a difference between making money and building wealth, which leads to legacy, right? Would you agree?
Yeah. And building serious wealth is not always, well, actually, I would say 90% of the time, not a walk in the park. If you have an overnight success business or perhaps inheritance, it doesn't go far. It's more of a snake on the body, as Taylor Welch said. So, man, there's so much goodness there. There was somewhere I wanted to go with that. What was your last point again?
I said something about the heart posture and how building a strong foundation. It's a big difference between making money and build a strong foundation with truly building wealth and legacy.
Oh, okay. That makes me think of really, again, another Bible verse, so just taking care of the household first. And I've had the pleasure, perhaps I didn't take it well the first time or first few times, of when Stacy and I were initially dating. She told me some situations where, like, if a lady would approach me to buy her groceries as we're going into a grocery store, she could tell me that she might be taking advantage of me. And I didn't really stop to consider that, but it makes me think of how, of course we should be charitable, but we also should be discerning. And in the last year or so, I've really learned something else, which is God wants our presence more than how much money we could give away. Although that is nice, and it's probably in his top 3 priorities. But if we're not hanging out with him, some silent walks, some retreats, like I want to do a silent retreat sometime soon, just so I could be able to hear his voice better and get away from all this noise. Like I just talked to you a few minutes ago about how Christopher Nolan, the director I love, he doesn't even have a phone. So how much more intense and concentrated is he as a person? And it makes me think of another thing. Pastor Torre on a podcast said he doesn't trust running in terms of business or family life, being a pastor, running towards a sermon, running towards starting up another business, scaling up another business, starting another book. He doesn't trust running for all that stuff unless he is still. And stillness is agitating for me. I'm pretty sure I've come to learn I have some ADHD recently, and so doing that is a bit unnatural, and I'm trying to work on it progressively, having routines with God, because ultimately if I can't hear what he's trying to get me to do for my time on this side of eternity, then what's the point? I'm just kind of throwing darts at a wall and hoping that it's something he wants. And that's a effective thing for a time. But again, if we take it even from a literal perspective, like you could start all these businesses and go talk to your parents like, hey, look what I did. Isn't that cool? Yeah, the parent would be like, that's cool, but I haven't seen you in 5 years. So how much more of that thought process is with God?
I hope y'all are still with me after this, because I want to clear up 2 things. One thing is I didn't tell him so much like, oh, they're taking advantage of you, but I just wanted him to be, he kind of followed up with it, more discerning, because contrary to you guys, just like you and your household know more of the story, I know more of the story, and I'm more of a quiet, chill, behind the scenes. So I happen to see even more of the story, right, by default. And so I just understood more of the story that we don't necessarily have to go into here per se, to understand. Again, I was more leaning towards, is it the works that's going to fulfill that heart? Because I know that, works does not work in these situations. So going back to heart posture and thinking about intentionality, just really, I was just calling for him to be a little bit more mindful so that he's able to make that from a clear, conscious decision versus
impulsive.
Yeah, exactly. That was more it. So I don't want y'all out here thinking, oh my God, Stacey's so mean, she don't want you to give to people. That's not it. I just wanted to be from a place of choice, a place of consciousness, a place of I'm doing this with the Lord, not I'm doing this in hopes that the Lord see me so that he can know that I'm a good person. Okay. So that's that. So another point I wanted to make, were you going to say something?
I mean, that you kind of touched on that for a second. Let me tease that out. So hoping that God will do something with you in exchange for a charitable situation. So I learned about a Bible verse recently that talks basically about God will not be backed into a corner. And so if we're caught up in sin consistently, but we're giving millions of dollars away or whatever, and basically trying to justify our sin because, oh, look, I gave all this away. God will not be backed in the corner into covering you because you're doing X, Y, and Z. So just wanted to say that real quick too. Go ahead.
And that's probably a really pertinent point for the world we're living in today, because it's so easy to dibble and dabble in sin, right? Or just doing things that our consciousness or intuition has said, girl, guy, back up. But we just keep going because we're too curious, right? So the other point I wanted to make was something that I forgot. Let's see if I can remember.
That's cool.
The other point I wanted to make. Oh my gosh.
Was it around discernment? We were touching on that.
It was around the heart posture identity thing. Anyway, I forgot. So
it's all good. So yeah, we've driven through a lot of different tie-ins for health and wealth, and what do they have to do with each other?
I remember.
Go ahead.
I remember. Well, I actually don't remember that point, but I remember something else I wanted to talk about, because he was like, think of something to talk about. I was like, even if I think of something to talk about, I'm going to forget. So I just rather talk in the moment with the flow. And another thing that came up was, he mentioned impulsiveness, and another side of that, I think, with social media, just the way everything comes fast, Amazon's delivered the same day sometimes, is that speed of expectation of things, the speed of outcome of the things that we think that we want versus the things that we should know that we need, right? And just really being mindful of that as well. Like when you go to the gym, you're not going to have muscles the next hour after you work out. Everything is a process. And just because we're not seeing the fruit of the seeds or the outcome of that process does not mean that it's not working necessarily. Again, that's why for at least us Christians, we should be in prayer and fasting, prayer, but especially prayer about, what's truly on our hearts and what's truly where we're supposed to be looking, because we're not alone and we don't have to do this all by ourselves. For y'all that are not into Christianity or any big religion, that's where journaling comes in. That's where being out in nature can come in, which also ties into the health piece, right? Because I think we spent a lot of time on the wealth piece this episode. But that's where those things can come in to clear the mind and connect with creation, with God's creation, and connect with who we are naturally designed to be. And then I will also say that a part of that process, if we choose to go along that journey, we're going to be shown a little more of not just who we are, but who we've been molded, conditioned, groomed to be because of previous exposures. So that was something that I remember my point in that, right? So my point was, a lot of times people label things or get labeled with having ADHD when it's really, I just can't look at myself. Because if I stop and I'm still for too long, things are going to flood in that does not make me feel good. It's going to make me feel shame. It's going to make me feel guilt. It's going to make me feel like I'm not good enough. It's going to make me feel like I'm a failure. It's going to make me feel like I'm ugly. It's going to make me feel like I'm too fat, too skinny. It's going to make me fill in the blank. I'm going to think all of these things that are probably not where your mind should be if you're too still, so you stay busy. It's going to make me think, what the heck am I doing? But sometimes we need to have those thoughts. Those aren't things that we need to ignore. We need to sit with and move through. The problem becomes when we're not able to move through those things. But we are human. We have emotions. They're not always going to be joyful, happy emotions. And that's okay. The difference is how long we choose to stay in that emotional,
rigmarole.
Yeah, thank you.
So, you know me, I like to look at the darkness. Being in the investment world, I have to look at the worst case scenarios. And that's kind of a great compliment of our marriage, is that she's a lot more optimistic about things, and more analytical about things too. But let's go into the darkness of like 2020 to speak about the valley for a second before we wrap up. Like, what made you, like I was going through a bad business closure because of a partnership that went awry. Of course, real estate was in a bunch of fear at that point, similar to right now. And all these liabilities were just kind of trailing us, right? And I was just working day to day on quashing and mitigating. And we eventually got through it. But, like, how did you, as my gorgeous, intelligent wifey, manage through that valley as my wifey?
A little bit of what I just talked about. So I had all the feelings. And so one thing though, because I've never been this type of person where if I'm having a bad day, I'm going to make it everybody else's bad day. And so even though you may not have seen it all of the time, when I say you, I mean him as well as like the global collective of humans. It was definitely a process because there were times that it was really scary. And I'm like, are we ever going to be able to reach our dreams or the goals that we have for ourselves? Because I take it global when I do think about things. Is he going to be able to come back from this? And what I mean by that is emotionally and mentally and spiritually come back from this. Because I understand how some people, but especially, hopefully this is not a generalization, you don't take it bad, but guys, like when there's failure in a guy's life, he seems to take it way harder than a woman or females would typically take failure. And so it's way more personalized. So I was a little nervous about, is he going to be able to pull back from this? And how long is it going to freaking take? Because, I can only say so much when he's in a certain state of mind. So that's how I handled that. Because going back to answer your question is, since I didn't know if he could hear me, because sometimes there's a point in time when you're with your partner where they can't always hear you and they will hear someone else before they hear you because you're just too close. And not only are you too close, they have this idea of how they want to be seen by you, right? So, but at the same time, we get to see more than what people tend to see. And so that can bring its own element of guilt and shame, right? So I just would go into prayer and go into just say, I'm still catching up on the fasting part like that. Just in all, I fast easier when I just forget to eat. But with the prayer piece, just really praying and asking God to help me not only have the space for empathy and compassion for him, but for myself in the midst of, for us as a collective whole too. For discernment and guidance on what to do, and to pray for him, because a lot of times we feel like as women there's things that we should be doing. We're always should be doing. Everybody expects us to be doing everything, right? We're just always supposed to be the doing people, like Energizer bunnies. But then just when we're still and we allow them to step up and the manhood and the masculinity that God provided for them, that's where a lot of my prayer really took root, where I'm like, help me to not just have the compassion and empathy for him, but help me to be able to just hold the fences for myself and let it play out. That's the scariest thing to do, is to let something play out, especially when it's going to directly affect you and your household. But just because if we end up being Mrs. Save-A-Lot, all the time, or trying to throw ideas out or whatever, we don't give ground for development. Because there's one thing for a man to be a masculine, healthy Christian man by himself. Is another thing when you, and I know you guys can attest to this better than I can, but to be a healthy, masculine Christian and human, right? When you're leading people that truly depend on you, when you have a household that you've been entrusted with, that's a whole different level of pressure. And so we can only understand those different levels of pressures, that we all have our versions of those, right? When we are allowed to go through the fire, like those three guys. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I had to think, I was like, what was her name? And I also had to have outlets. I had to take care of myself. Because one thing he said to me when we had a harder time that really pissed me off, but I probably needed to hear, is when he was like, well, I didn't tell you not to do that. Or I forget how you said it, but like, I didn't tell you. I think I was like, look at my hair, look all crazy, and this about that, this, everything. I can't remember what I was saying, but I was just like, got me up here looking crazy. And he was like, well, I didn't tell you to do that. And I was like, you know what? Because I am a reasonable person. He is not always reasonable, y'all. But no, that's another story. I was like, you know what? I take personal responsibility for that. He's not wrong. So we cannot lose ourselves as much as we can. So much trying to save the other person, fill in the blank, other persons, or just making sure everybody else a boat doesn't sink and we're sinking, right? So still, if you like to get your hair fixed, still get your hair fixed. If you like to get your nails done, get a massage, still be in prayer, still hang out with your friends, still go solo time. I'm an introvert, so I love my solo time. Still do all the things that keep you. Don't try your best not to lose that, which still means you can still get to cry, scream, be mad, all that good stuff. But yeah, just don't lose you in the process either. So I would say pray, create space for him to step into his next level of leadership within your household. And I would say don't lose yourself in the process, which should be step 0. Those are the three. There's way more, but those are the 3. Because he taking notes now, so he don't forget stuff. So I'm talking too much.
Yeah, as we start to wrap up and try to keep this under 30 minutes, I just want to wrap up with these few points. There's this phrase in Spanish that I don't think has an English equivalent. It's eso es vida, which is literally translated to that's life. When I say it in English, it's almost kind of sarcastic. But in Spanish, it's like, if you're enjoying a wonderful night of dancing like we did a few weeks ago, I would have said eso es vida. Like, that's real life. That's taking life in and really enjoying it. And when you talk about health and wealth and carrying that in a meaningful way with your spouse, with friends, these things came up for me as meaningful. Financial vulnerability is something that happened in 2020 because I was just such in a raw state of being that before then I thought, I just handle everything myself. But because of things outside of my control, things just happened. And so I was vulnerable with her for the first time, and I thought, she's definitely going to leave now. But she actually got closer to me because I would let her into the full picture. And so I think that is a beautiful situation, tying around eso es vida. At the same time, as a man, we should still strive and fight to be providers. Don't let the foot off the gas pedal there. But, if you approach your spouse about that, or perhaps somebody you're dating, and they just come out like, you're an idiot, like really making the situation even worse, instead of supporting you and guiding, maybe giving some advice, finding some courses. Stacy loves her courses. She has a bunch of financial courses and other romance and other things she's looked up. But yeah, being proactive, that's a much more healthy scenario versus somebody that's just going to keep you caught up in the shame and guilt of it all. Number 2, I would say, is answered prayers. I think both of us, we've had prayer situations to God that have been answered without us even telling the other person. Like, I've definitely had that with you. And could I say you've had that with me?
Oh my God, because sometimes, yes.
So yeah, that's pretty awesome to see God work in our individual lives without directly calling that out. That's proof of the pudding. And then lastly is God presence, which I'm still figuring out. And Stacy kind of makes fun of me because of it, because she says God is around you all the time. It's ridiculous how much he's not around you. But for me, like, it's not as frequent and literal as she experiences. She has a different talent with God that I'm working towards. But God presence, I've learned, can be even in very minuscule ways that are still arrow to the heart of beautiful love that just stops me dead in my tracks. Like a simple one that happened today was I was leaving volunteering, and Stacy drove her car right in front of the intersection light. And I was like, what are the odds that I would be walking out to this light as she's driving past? And you were like, yeah, especially doesn't make sense because I was over there at Dunkin' Donuts for 15 minutes for no reason, waiting in the drive-thru. But that, to me, reminds me of like, hey, if I was God, I would be saying, by the way, you guys belong together, and I'm going to give you a little ounce of validating that. And that's because she's literally in your vicinity as you're walking out of this. Like, it doesn't make sense otherwise. Like, this never happened before.
And I thought that was sweet because I thought it was God telling on me. Because I was like, oh my God, I hope Ivan doesn't see me. I'm going to drive by. Because he don't think I'm going to Dunkin' Donuts. And then next thing you know, he called and was like, hey, I saw you. And I'm like,
and from that direction, she has to be.
So I really appreciated his perspective. So that is a way, one of God's answered prayers too, because some of it I'm like, that had to be God, because with answering some of them prayers, because I was like, I don't know how this gonna happen, but and God worked it out without me, right? Without me, all I had to do was seeking, you shall find, asking, that verse. Yeah, so but what I was gonna say though, I got a little sidetracked, was I really appreciated his perspective of, I saw you, he called, and it was actually a joyful experience, where I was more in the side of, oh my God, I'm gonna tell on myself. And he thought it was a joyful experience. I was like, you know what, God, I'm gonna receive that joyful experience, that joyful energy from that, versus a more shameful one of, I shouldn't be going to Dunkin' Donuts every day.
Gotcha. I think those are great points to wrap up on. Anything you wanted to else, or anything else you wanted to say, Stace?
We just pray. Always pray. We don't know what else to do. Just pray. And then trust that no matter how far-fetched and far out it seems, our God still works miracles every single day.
Yes, and I've seen it for my own eyes. So, thanks for listening. Shoot in some more questions, and we'll be back next week.
See, y'all need to ask y'all a question.
Go ahead, you were...
Sorry, I thought he...
You thought I hit stop?
Yeah, I thought he had stopped. But I was like, yeah, ask your questions. Nothing's too big or too small. Of course, we can always get like super specific, but all we're doing is sharing from our personal and professional life experience, and us combined, we do have a lot of it. And the more that we as communities can do that again, I think that's what's missing right now in the world today. So a lot of people are making mistakes that we had more conversation about it, you know, it'd be a little bit different. Mm-hmm. We can make bigger mistakes because we're always going to make mistakes. We're human, right? But we'll just make the other ones, not the basic ones. Mm-hmm. That probably wasn't a good way to end that. So, God bless you.
No, it's fine. I'm trying to think of a verse, not a verse, just a random quote I had on my cubicle back when I worked corporate. It was, what better mistakes could I make tomorrow?
That's a great way to end it.
Yep.
Bye, y'all.
Later.